Welcome everyone to Professional Pioneers with ProVision Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Muhammad Junaid Ismail, and as you may well know, ProVision Alliance NGO has set its sights on eradicating unemployment, helping the youth discover and forge their dream careers, and propelling them into becoming the future leaders of industry that our country so desperately needs. This podcast is inspired to help aspiring professionals understand and discover the careers they may well go into. Have you ever found yourself asking, how do I become a doctor or a lawyer? How do I start a business? Where do I study? And how do I get funding? These are some of the questions we will be answering on our podcast with our variety of guests who come from humble beginnings and have inspirational stories of how they've overcome the obstacles. And here is where they will share their advice and wisdom they've gotten along the way.
Welcome everyone to Professional Pioneers with ProVision Podcast. I'm excited to introduce a wonderful guest today with lots of wisdom on our theme for the month, learning and leadership. Today we have Keith Richardson with us. I know Keith for quite some time. He was the headmaster of Wynberg Boys High School when I was a student there. And through my journey, he's basically taught me a lot that I know now of what leadership is. And I was a prefect under Keith, and I learned most of my leadership skills, I would say, from him in my formative years. So Keith, if I'm not mistaken, you were a student at Bishop's.
Yeah.
And then you went to UCT to do your Bachelor of Arts with a focus on education, and then you did your Masters at Exeter University.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so since then, Keith has left Wynberg Boys and he's got involved with an organization called Coaching of Principals.
It's called the Principals Academy, and we coach principals who volunteer for the job, which is much easier than taking a bunch of school children who don't want to be there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
So these guys want to improve, they want to learn, so it's actually very worthwhile.
I'm sure there's probably quite an interesting difference between those two. In terms of being a headmaster as opposed to, like, even the idea of being in a school where, especially model C schools where, people pay a lot of fees, so they have high expectations. I'm sure running a school like Wynberg must have been very tough for you.
Not really, because I like the energy of Wynberg, and it was a school where basically the pupils were happy and they wanted to achieve. And I enjoyed working with them because there was a natural enthusiasm. And I miss it enormously. Boys have a natural enthusiasm.
That's true. I mean, being a student at the school, I think there was an amazing culture at Wynberg. Now, being out of school, kind of being able to be exposed to different people from different schools, post-high school, Wynberg definitely had an amazing culture of, transformation, integration, people coming from different parts of life, and kind of sharing that culture, which I thought was amazing compared to some of the other schools.
Yeah, well, the word culture is what we're trying to do in our schools at the moment, and give them a culture. But to have a culture, you've got to know where you want to go. And what you want to achieve. Culture comes from a Latin word meaning to worship. So if you say the culture of a school is, what do you worship in the school? What do you think is important? And our schools need more of that. Because they don't have a culture there. They've got teachers who just see it as a job. And if you see something as a job, you're not going to get a culture. And I think the Model C schools, and that's worthy of a discussion in itself, seem to have teachers who are there because they want to be there and they want to improve the pupils that they've got there, and to give them a good start in life. And when you've got teachers who that enthusiastic, it's a good school, it's got a good culture.
And do you think that the cultivation of that culture is on the shoulders of the leadership in the schools?
Yes, absolutely. The direction that the culture takes is first and foremost on the principal. The principal leads the way and encourages it. And then once the teachers are buying into it, then the pupils will just follow.
Okay. So from your perspective then, what are some of the challenges that leaders in schools will face, or that you've maybe experienced or seen, that makes it difficult to develop that culture?
Yeah, well, it's It's different. We've got such a wide variety of schools in Cape Town and in South Africa, and you can't. The Model C schools are not ex-Model C schools are not the norm. And they're lucky that they've got money to pay for extra teachers to make sure the classes are smaller, and they can. But money's not the answer. The answer to changing a culture in the school, and the answer to South Africans' education, is teacher training. And if you were to ask me what the state should be doing about schooling, it is actually to ensure the quality of teaching improves, and that is the single biggest problem in South African schooling at the moment, is quality teachers. And you asked about leadership specifically, and essentially you also started off by saying that we work together as prefect and headmaster, which probably was one of the best parts of my job, is helping young leaders realize what potential they have within them. And I think I probably enjoyed that more than anything else, actually, is creating leaders among the staff, because you judge a school or lead in a school by how many other leaders he creates or she creates. And so if folk have left the school to become deputy principals and principals, I think that's what it's all about. And that is one of the biggest challenges of working with prefects in a school, is that you have to convince them that prefectship is not about the badge. It's about the job that you do, but it's also creating other leaders. And young men, women of 17 want to shine themselves. They don't want others to get the glory. And somehow you've got to get through to them. If you think back to those days, it's not about you. It's about the other leaders you're helping to create. So we encourage you to get committees together, give other people jobs, and that your job was actually saying, how can I help? How can I help you become a good leader? And to get young people of 17 to realize that leadership is about creating other leaders and letting others shine, that is a huge challenge. But when it works, you see some amazing results. And if you cast your mind back to your year, the best leaders were the ones that were able to do that and stand back and let others take the glory. You don't see it with Trump. He wants it all. You don't see it in other populist leaders around the world, be it in the UK or be it in South Africa. They want to be in the limelight all the time, and they're not prepared to stand back and let others get the glory through initiative and ideas that they've got.
That's really true.
And I think I was lucky to be in the school that I was in, because we had the opportunity to develop leaders among the staff, among teachers, and we could talk off air about who's gone on at Wynberg to do well as leaders in the teaching profession, one of which was your housemaster, and among the boys, if they learn those leadership skills early, that it's about letting others shine, then we've done a good job. And then you can say and I hope we can say that our school helps create a new South Africa.
Definitely. And it's quite interesting that you've singled out that skill of being able to delegate, being able to see the potential in others, and not being like kind of individual focused in what you have to provide to the team as a leader, but more looking at your team and saying what potential is here to cultivate more leaders, to give people the capacity and the space to explore their leadership qualities, as opposed to
and make mistakes.
Yes.
They've got to make mistakes, and no schoolboy leader wants to be in a position where he looks an idiot, and they're too frightened to try something. So we had to make it very clear to people at the time, the young leaders at the time, it's okay to make mistakes, but try things. And you used the word a moment ago, delegation. That is such a difficult thing for a school leader. I don't mean adult, I mean among their own sort of pupils, because they think delegation is dumping. Okay, you do it and get on with it. Whereas delegation is, you've got the job, I believe in you, I trust you, and let me know I can help you.
And that's actually something that I still struggle with today. I think it's more from a personal capacity, feeling like I have to do everything. I've always had to do things myself, so I think many people might have that fear of asking for help and might see it as a sign of weakness.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I think that's something we should change in the perspective. I think sharing what it means to be a leader, I think, is important, and I'm glad you shared that. Is there a moment in your career that stands out where you had to make a really tough decision as a leader?
Yeah, I think probably, there are a lot of difficult decisions you have to make. Folk think that leadership is just about, you decide this, you decide that, but you're dealing with people. And when you deal with people, that is what is difficult, because you're dealing, if it's with an adult, anyone in the school, you're dealing with someone's life. And you're dealing with their self-esteem. And so, there are times that you have, but the most difficult decisions are when you have to make decisions about people. It's, you don't mind mistakes, but they can't go on and on making mistakes. And there have been times that you've had to ask prefects, you've done it now. You can't continue when you've broken trust. Because the higher up the teaching game you go, breaking trust is difficult to get over. I often used to say that trust was like a very delicate cup, a china cup, which is very narrow material. You drop that cup on a stone floor, it'll shatter into 1,000 pieces. And I used to say to the folk, that cup is called trust. Now, can you put that cup is that cup of any use now? Can you put it together again? And most times people say, no, you can't. And I say, you should go and put it together, super glue it and get all the pieces, and you can put the cup together. But then they always say, but. The cup is not quite the same. And that's what trust is. If you break the cup and you shatter it, you can put it together again. But if you made a promise and you've broken that trust, it's very difficult to have the same relationship again. And I think when people have broken trust, then that's when you've got to make the difficult decisions to say, maybe we're going to have to put you somewhere else.
And that kind of speaks to people trusting leaders and leaders trusting the people that work under them. The trick with that is what my headmaster told me. And you said you and I worked together. I spent my entire life, from the moment I decided to be a teacher at the age of 11, watching teachers and watching leaders. So I watched my principals at work when I was at school. I watched leaders, and be it at university and now, you watch Erasmus or and see how these people operate. And it's important that you actually see what they've done. What would I have done in that situation? And you learn that way. You actually learn by watching other people. That's quite interesting. That kind of ties into the idea of mentorship and learning through experience. I think many students have this narrow-minded view of what learning is, and I think most students probably don't really know how to learn, because I don't think it's taught well in school how to learn. Students usually get taught what to learn, and most of the time they just kind of read the information. So I think many of the students we deal with in our program, they think learning is just kind of absorbing information through just reading it and reading it and reading it. And what I found is, yes, reading is important, but observation, life, like physical life experience is helpful. And we've really seen that in the mentorship program where especially in-person events, the mentees learn a lot more through the experiences of their mentors and watching them do what they do. So in terms of mentorship, I know you're currently a mentor, mentoring principals in the schools in South Africa or Western Cape. So how has that experience been? What is your idea of what mentorship is?
Mentorship is a skill. You have to learn it. It's important before people in our organisation become mentors that they go through a course and they have it explained. And the first thing about mentorship is you've got to remind people about physiology, and that is you've got 2 ears and a mouth, and you use them in that ratio. So you've got to listen before you talk. And it's very difficult for a teacher to do that because they're used to talking.
Yes.
And when you become a mentor, whether it's at school or after school like I'm doing now, is that you've got to just ask questions and then sit back. And that's the skill, is asking questions, not giving the answers. Because when you're a mentor, you've got to firmly and implicitly believe that the person you're mentoring has got the answers within them. So everybody knows how to learn. You just got to pull it out of them and get them to think. And the greatest skill in reflecting and being a schoolmaster or being a leader in a school or in anywhere else is getting people to think and getting them to reflect. So from a very early age in teaching, and then you start this right at primary school, you've got to say, well, help me to understand. Those important words there. Help me to understand why your maths mark was low. And for most boys, especially boys, but girls to a lesser extent, but boys will say, I don't know. Now, you wouldn't have been in the situation which you would never in the back of my office. But I used to say to them, I don't know is banned in this office, you can't say it. Now, so let's start it again. Where did we go wrong, and what have you learned from this incident of getting 20% in maths, or getting into trouble at school, or whatever, or coming late? Help me to understand how this came about. And then once you've got past the I don't know, and you force them to think, you've got to force children to think. And then you can say, right, now that you've worked out where you've gone wrong, what are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? And that is teaching people how to learn. You're getting them to reflect on what's gone wrong, and then what are you going to do about it? And now give me a plan of action, and give me dates of it. So you say, right, you're going to redo the test, we did badly. What are you going to do? You're going to go and ask the teacher to help explain it to you. Or you're going to go to another boy and ask where you've gone wrong. And then you're going to do the test again. When are you going to have it done by? What are you going to do with it then? And so you just ask a series of questions, but to get young people to reflect, and staff members if you're running a school. I mean, with staff members, the question would be, okay, things went wrong in that class. Maybe the discipline had gone a bit. Now, what will you do in the future to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And how can I help you? Which is easier for me because I've seen it all, but I'm not going to give the answers. As a mentor, you don't give the answers, you wait till they come out of the person. You ask questions till those answers come out. And then you take responsibility. You said that was the problem. You said you'd have it done by that date. Right. You take ownership now.
Yeah.
So by getting people to reflect and to think about it, they are taking ownership of the problem. And it's not me saying, you blithering idiot, this is what you should have done.
Yes. I think that's very valuable because most people, especially teachers, might, from the feedback I get from the students we have, many teachers kind of just tell them, this is what you do, this is how you go about things. And as a tutor myself, I quickly learned the best way to tutor is to prompt, is to ask questions. Okay, why is this wrong, or what do you do at this point? And very rarely I would give them the answer. I would prompt them until they got the answer, because something you said is so simple but so profound, is to get people to think. People try and avoid it as much as possible, and teachers may think that, or even mentors may think that it's easier to just tell them because that prompting process can be tiring. Yeah.
But it's not long lasting because they haven't taken ownership. And in fact, what most school children want to do is they just want to get out of your office. So they'll say anything to get out of your office. Let's start again.
Yeah.
And you try not to use the word why as a mentor. So you don't say, if you're talking to a school child, you don't say why if you've done your homework, because that's judgmental. And as a mentor, you don't judge. But you've got to take ownership of this. I'm not judging you, so you've got to tell me how this came about. But you don't use the word why because it's aggressive. Why haven't you done your homework? I mean, your heart took a thing there.
Yeah, I get you.
And so you've got to do it. How can I help you? I think it's just such powerful words. So how can I help you get out of the situation? And that doesn't allow people a chance to say, I don't know, or I'll do better next time, or I'll work harder.
Yeah.
Hang on, what do you mean by I'll work harder? I don't understand. Help me a bit more in this way. And so you just keep on with the questions, but pinning them down. And then at the end, you say, now let me see, I've been writing this down. Have I got this correct? You're going to ask your teacher for more work. You're going to redo it by tomorrow, you said. And then you're going to take it back to the teacher again. and you're going to have it marked, and you can see what you did wrong. Then you're going to go to Judah and Ishmael in the boarding house, and you're going to say, can you help me with this problem? Have I got it right? Have I understood you correctly? So they can't get over it now. You can't wriggle over it now. And that mentoring is a real art that comes with time, and you get better as you go on. But yeah, it's fairly easy to do that with young people, but yeah, you got to do it with adults as well.
And I think it's quite interesting how you framed that line of questioning. It's similar to something we are trying to teach our mentees now, is this kind of SMART goals approach, where you're specific, the goal that you're setting is measurable, it's appropriate, and it's relevant, and it's time-bound. So the way you phrase the questions falls in that kind of framework, so that you can have a clear idea of what actionable steps you're going to take, as opposed to just saying, anything to get out of the situation. And I think that's a very valuable tool. Whenever people find that they want to solve a problem, that kind of problem-solving approach is very helpful. I wanted to now transition to the idea of education, transformation, and the school system in South Africa. So previously you've written about the confusion between assimilation and transformation in schools. What do you think transformation looks like in South African schools, or what it should look like?
Look, we changed a lot. I can remember when, back in the 90s, I used to think, well, we've opened our schools up. Great, we're now going to take in all South Africans, and we must just make them into little white boys, and we were very naive at the beginning, very naive, and we've learned as we've gone along, and we've actually learned what the meaning of diversity is, I think, now. And diversity is you've got your skill and your culture, and by bringing it into our school, we're actually all enriched. Now that is a big step, because we weren't like that at the beginning. You come to our schools, and you do things our way. Now we've changed completely from that. And so diversity is actually celebrating how everyone can bring a different culture and life outlook into your schools. And I think that schools that haven't adapted to that thinking are not doing their children any favors, because you leave a school now like the ones you and I were at. I think people have learned to work with all sorts of cultures, and they go out to society much stronger and much more understanding. And that's what we need now. Assimilation means you come in and just become like we are. But transformation means that we transform as well by having you. So transforming means you actually change because of all the influences that have come into your life. And I think a transformed South African school is a really, really exciting place.
Yeah, because I think it's so important for us to acknowledge, the different skills and qualities that different people bring to an institution like a school. And I think Wynberg is definitely one of the forerunning schools, the previously Model C schools, that's kind of built that ethos of acceptance. And I'm quite happy with where things were. I went recently to the rugby festival, and the energy at Wynberg has been one of acceptance and appreciation of different people from different backgrounds. I remember something I really loved was the African Society events. I always went to those. It was lovely. And I think even in how the school runs its basic things like assemblies, we always had Christian prayers, Muslim prayers, Xhosa people also speaking in the assembly or giving their kind of background. So I think it's so important for us to be able to appreciate that, and we all learn from each other, and I think that's very valuable. Yeah,
I remember the one Founders Day we had a white boy doing the course of prayers. If you remember, or if you were there at the time.
Yes.
And a coloured boy doing the white, the English, not the white, the English. And I just thought it was fantastic. And a black boy did the Afrikaans.
It's so important to cultivate a sense of understanding and appreciation, especially in South Africa. We know with our history, it's so important to break some of these kind of long-standing perceptions of people. And that's something I think we are also trying to do with the NGO, with our students particularly. So not necessarily the outside community, but if you look at our focus group at the moment, which is the Cape Flats, many of the students believe that they cannot achieve because of the perception of colored people in the broader South Africa. Is, there's these kind of ideas that, colored people want to be gangsters and all of these sorts of things. And so it not just affects how other people perceive them, but it actually affects how people of that community perceive themselves. Yeah. So even within different spaces, I know we were focusing on Wynberg here, but even in the NGO, it's so important to break some of these stereotypes around certain communities and opening people's eyes to the fact that they have potential and they don't have to follow this narrative that's been created.
Yeah, and the way to actually change, and it's been done like this in other parts of the world as well, where they've been in similar situations, is to take London, inner city London, where by and large the deprived areas are where people of colour stay. And how they've changed it there, we've got to take a lesson from that, and that is take the people who've come out of the communities like yourself, and they've been successful, and take them back into the schools again and say, look what others have achieved, be it in sport, or in your case medicine, and others who become teachers and engineers. I mean, they'll be there, and they've got to come back into their communities and show that it is possible to actually aim high. I mean, I've got a story in one of our schools out in the Wynberg area, and the head there is particularly keen that they make something of themselves. And he asked one boy who was in trouble and said, "What do you want to be?" And what's your ambition? He said, "I want to go and be a vlagwaayer. I want to stand on the side of the road and just wave the red flag to slow the traffic down." That is his ambition. We're in series, and I asked one of the principals in the series, "What made you get to this position?" He said, my family, not my family, but the people I grew up, the friends I grew up with, they've all gone on to the farms and they've just become apple pickers and so on, and working for other people. He said, but my mother said to me, "You're better than this. You go and you get a good matric and you get to further qualifications." So to get, I'm giving you sort of two answers here. That first of all, you've got to bring people back in the community who've been successful and show that it can be done. But you rely a lot on your family saying, "You're better than this."
That's very true. I think that resonates with me as well, because for as long as I could remember, my granddad had always kind of drilled this idea in my head that I would become a doctor. So, and this was since primary school. So in primary school, I did really well in academics for the longest time. I think it was the one thing I really enjoyed, and it was my escape from the environment I was in. But I think without her support, I probably would not have ended up where I am today. And so with our mentees, we're also trying to cultivate the culture of community with the parents as well, and having them kind of support them and be involved as much as possible, because you do need a support structure if you are going to succeed. No person can succeed on their own. And that's something, we are trying to cultivate with the mentorship program as well, because some students at home, they don't necessarily have a family member that...
well, you know what the stats are of South Africans who, young South Africans who do not have fathers present in the house? 84%.
Wow.
84% is that. So where are the role models coming from? So I say to you, you've got to bring them in and say, it is possible for a male young boy to achieve. Look what's been done. They've had the strength of character and the courage. It all depends on courage. And courage is an interesting word as well, because it comes from the Latin word cor, meaning a heart. So what do you got in your heart? How badly do you want to become a doctor? How badly do you want to become a soccer player? And so you've got to have courage to actually work and say no where it is necessary. He's done it, why can't you do it? So the mother becomes more and more important now with so few fathers in the house. So it's interesting you mention your grand. But those stories are just so common. So you need adults as role models, you need adults as mentees, you need mentors, And you need adults to actually say there's a better way. And teachers, of course.
Yes, we cannot forget the teachers. I wanted to ask, in your work now as coaching other principals, what have you identified as the most important challenges that need to be overcome by the schools in underserved communities?
Yeah, it's a difficult. That's a long answer and and not difficult, which is so much. But you've got to decide, well, what would we have done if there'd been no COVID? Because COVID has actually stuffed everything, and has put us years and years back. I've just come from school this morning where the pass rate in grade 8 was 7%. Now in the end of the first term, so they're the COVID generation. We've had some matrics go through who also that generation, but these guys are coming to grade 8. Now that's when they were learning how to read and they were at home. And if they haven't got a father who's sitting there with the book saying, this is a good time while you're at home to read a book, where's their role model going to be? So you've got a generation coming through now that actually hasn't been taught the basics properly. So I think we are producing generations of girls, pupils now that don't know how to read properly. And if you can't read, you can't do anything. You can't answer a maths problem. So you can't even talk literacy unless they can read, because the question says add up these two numbers or subtract that from that. If you don't understand basic English or whatever language you're learning in, and it's a big move to have home language no longer in school, because the moment you turn to English or Afrikaans in grade 4, maybe if they could really understand they should be in their home language longer, but that's another thing. I think it's a huge problem at the moment, the basics. And they're talking now and have made moves that they'll go down and grade R will become compulsory, but they haven't got the money for it and they haven't got the teachers for it. So I don't know if that's going to help at the moment of that factor. But I think a huge problem at the moment is that they don't have quality teachers teaching the basics to allow the next generation to come through with those basics. I mean, 8% pass rate in a fairly prominent school is actually worrying. And the other thing is but this is just a personal hobby horse of mine, I think social media is absolutely disastrous for education. Anyone can say what they like on social media about the principal. They can say what they like about the teacher, and who's going to say they're wrong? Because you can't defend yourself on social media. And of course the bullying that goes on social media is another factor. That's a huge crisis. So I've given you a couple of things there. One is literacy and numeracy. You've got to concentrate on the quality of teachers. You've got to, and social media. I don't know how you're going to get around that. But everything depends on the leader in the school. The school is dependent on the principal. The principal is the lever for change. The principal appoints the teachers, enthuses the pupils, keep them pointing in the right direction.
So on a macro scale, if you could change one thing in this, or let's just focus on the Western Cape maybe, in the education system, what would you change and why?
Okay, now it's going to be a roundabout answer to the question, but so much of the education system is dependent on the economic situation and social situation, and we can't change that. So you asked me for an educational answer, but a lot of these children are coming from homes where they're hungry, they're abused, the parents don't have work. I don't know the stats, but I know that they talk on the alcohol fetal syndrome babies as being huge, and you can only teach those children up to a certain level if they've got alcohol syndrome. And then you've got the tick babies that you can't teach at all. So as this gets worse and drugs become worse in our society, so you asked me what are you going to do about education, but you can't educate a tick baby. So they're destined to be climbing over garden walls and robbing houses. I mean, what have they got? They can't be taught. But let's stay, for the sake of your question, let's take that out of it, the social conditions of drugs, crime, and poverty. And the single biggest thing that's got to change in education is teacher training. The universities have got to be putting more and more resources into to turn out teachers who do it because they want to give South African youth a better chance of making something of themselves.
Why do you think there is such a lack of drive for that? For example, I don't know the details of this, but I know there was a budget cut in education and health. I'm not sure around the politics and all of that, but it doesn't quite seem like it's a priority. Why do you think that is, just from your opinion?
Because education takes such a long time before you see the effects of it. So, you're in school for 12 years. So money put into ECD now, early childhood development now, you're only going to see in 12 years' time with the matric results, and matric is not enough now. I'll tell you other stats. They reckon that you've got a 27% chance of getting a job if you don't have a matric. Give a guess what that figure jumps to if you got a matric for getting a job. 27% who do not have a matric can get a job. If you got a matric,
50?
Nope, 29%.
2%.
It hardly moves.
Yeah.
So matric is actually not enough. But then it really does jump. I led you into by saying what does it jump to? It doesn't jump at all. It barely moves. But once you've got a tertiary qualification, be it plumbing or be it an electrical diploma of some sort, or be it university, or be it medicine, your chances of a job increase by every year of post-school education that you have. Wow. Your chance improves. And you should see at one stage, I don't know what they currently are, but when I was still at Wynberg, I remember Max Price, you would have been there. Yeah. He came and spoke in assembly and he said 85% of our folk who leave here with degrees will get a job. Now, I don't know what it is now. Yeah. But every year post-school that you spend in education will increase your chances of job. But a matric is only a door to further qualifications. It doesn't guarantee you a job. There's many matrics sitting on the gutters than there are of non-matrics.
Yeah, I think it's quite important. It's quite an important concept because education is so important, and you spoke on the basics, but I think the perception of what education is also needs to change, because many students just believe like they are forced to go to school. They don't see any real value, and if you tie that into poorly trained teachers, it kind of makes the problem worse. You often find that you need like one really good, enthusiastic teacher that can change a student's life. But with the NGO, we're also trying to focus on getting their mind thinking towards university, because I must say the difference in perspective is quite different if in an environment like Wynberg as opposed to an environment like, let's say, Tafelsig High School, for example, or Lavendale, where students at Wynberg, I would hazard a guess, at least 60% of students know it's not even an option to not study further. Like the kind of assumption is that you're going to study further. Where and what you study is the question. Whereas students from the less fortunate schools, they don't have that role model or someone in the family that's gone to university that's made a success. So their first assumption is, I need to get a job. And sometimes in their mind, even if they knew that stuff, they probably wouldn't have any desire to finish matric, because they'll probably think, well, if I'm just trying to get a job in like retail or something like that. Exactly, or apple picker, they won't really see the value of that education. And usually people only realize many years once they've left school that actually, the education was important, and now they feel like it's too late. I find many people who haven't done their matric or haven't done well in their matric because at the time they didn't think anything of it. Now they are working and they really want to get a better job, or they're not working, and they are so scared to rewrite the matric, for example, because they feel like it's too late now and that sort of thing. So
I've introduced the stats. See, I'm giving you stats now. The stats of people who redo matric and improve is 1 in 3. So 2/3 of everyone who says, I'm going back to matric, you're out to get better marks. It doesn't work like that. You really only have one chance, and that's the chance where the staff, the teachers are there to help you. All your mates are the same age and all working towards it. If you come back and rewrite matric, marks don't improve.
Because then you'll need a lot of external resources like getting tutors and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you need to have a lot of self-motivation because when you wrote matric, everyone was in that boat. They were all coming home at night, all having to work, all have to get up early to do work. But now who does that for you when you've left matric?
I wanted to ask, you have quite a diverse kind of history around you, and Wynberg is a school where we don't just focus on academics. So I wanted to kind of pivot towards extracurriculars, like sport. I know you're very big on sport. What are some of the kind of character traits that you think sport brings out of people? Because many of our students at the schools that we help, sport isn't a big deal, and students see it as something that's going to take more time away from the academics. So how do you motivate students to do sport? Like, what are the things that they can do?
I don't think it matters what sport you do. I'm not I mean, obviously got sports that I personally enjoy, but that's not the issue. The issue is that sport is a social. There's so many things to sport, apart from learning how to lose and committing yourself and overcoming disappointment. You know, you arrive as a superstar soccer player, now you play in the D side or something. You know, and it's important to learn to fight back from that. So it's the whole emphasis on not giving up, continuing to try is important. But the reason that I push sport so much was that it is a way to bring all South Africans together in a school like ours. And you actually don't care what colour the guy is next door to you. If he scores the goal, you give him as big a hug as you would for anyone. And so sport is learning to work together and learning the lessons of life together. That whole diversity that sport brings and working together in a fun way, running up the mountain together. You know, that's when it's raining and you can't practice up the mountain, you go. I think that's important, and that's why I gave it a great push.
I think it teaches us a lot of kind of good life lessons in a safe and enjoyable environment.
Correct, that's it. No, in fact, he's put it farther than I did, because school is a safety net that carries disappointment. They don't have that when they leave school. You know, your safety net of family and teachers at school is gone now. So it's important for folk to play sport at school. What sport is actually makes very little difference.
And I know for myself, I was playing rugby at Wynberg, and I only realized now how much of a stress relief and a mental health reliever that was. So I wanted to ask you a bit more on that. In terms of in this world now where young people face so many challenges and mental health issues with like bullying online and having like seeing all these other people being successful online and feeling like they might not amount to something. Like, what are some of the ways in which they can build resilience from your perspective?
Yeah, obviously you get back to mentoring again. It's important, I think, for older pupils to be mentoring younger pupils. It's important for them to realize that their job is to actually help the youngsters come through. And so you would know that I was quite big on the senior boys, helping the young ones overcome their disappointments. But resilience is something that you need help, and you can't just say, I've got resilience. You know, you've got to have people putting a loss or being dropped from a side and putting it in perspective. Just like the way you need adults to help folk through bereavement at school, loss of a family member, you actually need to get the idea through to everybody, be it adult or pupil in your school, that get good friends. Good friends actually get you through the tough times, be it illness, you know, be it a disappointment or whatever. You do need to have friends who've got your back. And I think the greatest thing as a mentor that you could say to your mentee is, I've got your back. But the higher up you go, who says that? So who says that to the principal? I've got your back.
That's true.
But staff members have got to say, the principal says, I've got your back. Senior boys have got to say, I'm going to help you get through this. So to have someone who has your back is a very important part of developing resilience and developing an ability to fight back.
One last question.
And I'm on your side. I used to say this to the lady teachers. You want to win, boys? Just say, I'm on your side. We're fighting this battle together to get you to understand maths. Or to get you to write a good English essay. I'm on your side. Now you go in there and you rewrite it. and together we're in the same team. It's a powerful word. So words like that are powerful in bringing up young people.
Just feeling like you have support, and that if you do end up failing, it's not the end. And you have a community and a group of people, or a single person that's going to stand by you. Because I think many people fear rejection. They fear this idea that they are not good enough. And what we've seen with our mentees is that often when we try and challenge them, they don't try at all because of that fear.
Yeah.
And I think having that kind of support system, or even just one person that says, I have your back, is so important.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone. I'm with you in this battle.
And I think that's a big issue we face now, is that students do feel alone, even though they are connected online. And
online those are not friends.
One last question before we finish. Can you share one powerful story around mentorship, whether it's as a mentor or someone who mentored you that may shape your life?
Yeah, look, there are a couple of things. I'm not going to answer it quite at the beginning, as you probably imagine, but I think that one of the greatest lessons I learned is from one of the heads I worked under about humour and not to take yourself too seriously. You've got to have that in a school. You can't take yourself seriously, because otherwise you're going to be depressed. And you've got to learn to laugh with boys, with pupils, with staff members. So the idea of you can change a situation completely with a quip or a comment, and you can get people laughing together with you. And that was an important lesson I learned from one principal I worked with when I was taking life very, very seriously and very upset with a group of boys. And he just showed me the art of a sense of humour, and I'm very, very grateful for that lesson, because I certainly encourage people not to take themselves too seriously, and sometimes laugh with boys when they're just being stupid, and you just laugh. So that's probably the greatest lesson I learned from a person I admired, was the ability to keep a sense of humour. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you so much, Keith. I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing all your wisdom. There's a lot to learn in that episode. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And just keep knowing where you're aiming towards. That's what gets you through too.